And I've written it for those too young to remember the war, but who have that built-in BS detector that tells them that the story they get from the media, and probably in school, is a crock. I trust them to recognize the truth when they hear it. Here is the true story of the Vietnam War, as it actually was, by someone who fought there as a Marine pilot and later as a pilot for the CIA's Air America, and who has made a lifetime study of the war, and even written a satirical novel about its absurdities. No war in American history is in greater need of a politically incorrect, another word for honest treatment, than the Vietnam War, because the people who misreported the war, hammered vile lies about it into our national consciousness, and now tout its supposed lessons, are the very same people who created political correctness in the first place. Shame on them. Chapter 1. Why We Were in Vietnam. Guess what? North and South Vietnam had been divided since at least the 16th century. Communist leader Ho Chi Minh had trained as a French pastry chef. While Ho Chi Minh's land reform program resulted in tens of thousands of executions, starvation, and dependence on foreign aid, South Vietnam doubled its rice production in the 1950s. It was World War II, the Good War, that got the United States involved in what liberals would eventually want to paint as the Bad War, though liberals were the ones mostly responsible for our fighting it. Before World War II, Vietnam was a colony of France. During the war, it was occupied, with the reluctant permission of Vichy France, by the Japanese, the common enemy of the United States and the communist Viet Minh. So in 1945, a handful of American Office of Strategic Services, OSS, precursor to the CIA agents, parachuted into Vietnam to recover American prisoners of war and help the communist Viet Minh fight the Japanese. Americans fighting on the side of the communists? Well, you have to remember, at the time we were allies with Uncle Joe Stalin and the Soviet Union. American foreign policy was far less worried about communist expansion in the waning days of the war, before China became communist and communist activities heated up in Southeast Asia and Korea, than it was with the French, British, and Dutch looking to re-establish their colonies. In fact, anti-colonialism had been a sort of bugbear for Franklin Roosevelt, who put Joseph Stalin on a somewhat higher moral plane than Winston Churchill. As Roosevelt put it, "Of one thing I am certain, Stalin is not an imperialist, unlike the devotedly imperialist British Prime Minister." No doubt that was small comfort to the people of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and elsewhere, who would gladly have traded Soviet friendship for British imperialism. For those who have forgotten, communism had an even more murderous record than Hitler's Nazis, and represented a far more oppressive and tyrannical regime than your average fascist state. Mussolini's Italy was a libertarian paradise compared to Stalin's Russia. Still, even after Roosevelt's death, anti-colonialism remained the fallback position of American foreign policy, equally popular on the isolationist-leaning right and the progressive left. After the war and the defeat of the Japanese, who had taken over Vietnam, the country was put into the temporary care of Great Britain in the south and China in the north, though it was still occupied by the French, who'd never fully left. China had not yet gone communist, and was led by Chiang Kai-shek, America's wartime ally against the Japanese. The division of Vietnam between North and South was neither original nor arbitrary. In the late 16th century, the country had been divided by two huge walls above the plains of Quang Tri, in the far north of South Vietnam, erected by the Nguyen family, one of many regimes waging bloody feudal battles for control of the countryside. Before that, until the 15th century, 90% of what became South Vietnam belonged either to the Kingdom of Champa in south-central Vietnam or Cambodia. In these earlier years, North Vietnam and South Vietnam were combatants, even trying to pit rival European powers against each other, the South seeking assistance from the Portuguese and the North from the Dutch. Far from being an established nation, it was actually not unusual for Vietnam to be occupied. For most of what the West calls the first millennium, Vietnam belonged to China, and for much of its history after, Vietnam was a vassal state of China. It wasn't until the middle of the 19th century that the French displaced the Chinese as the leading power in the region. French influence began with Catholic missionaries, though hundreds of Catholic priests and thousands of their supporters were killed in periodic pogroms ordered by the Vietnamese rulers. These became the rationale for the French to finally invade Vietnam in 1858, in what began as a punitive expedition and became a war of successful